As the reach of social media further expands, it becomes an even more present part of our daily life. This makes the necessity for marketing and scaling more apparent. From new YouTubers to TikTokers and channels of all sorts, engagement and analytics are a small and fairly misunderstood part of content creation. On this episode, I am joined by my friend and fellow content creator as we focus on social media marketing landscape. Growing up in upstate New York and being a part of her family's restaurant, she recounts her early experience and seeing the differences between mom and pop shops and corporate businesses. We delve into her decision to study media production and the circumstances that led her across the country for a short time, then back east, where her content creation experience allowed her to be the founder of her own business in social media consulting. As well, we explore the nuances of correlating relationships and business ventures, along with what it takes to be an independent business owner, entrepreneur, and self-starter en mi comunidad. Welcome back to the ESL sessions on this segment of En mi comunidad, in my community. And on this, another very, very anticipated episode, I have a longtime friend, a fellow content creator, but not only that, this individual, this great friend has actually done a lot with her life and her career since we each parted ways. I want to say it like that for the moment because we all never really stopped being in contact with each other or keeping tabs on each other. We'll put it like that. But she's grown and she's made a lot of things happen in her life. She's expanded on her ventures and has given me honestly a lot of personal advice on how to be able to manage this podcast and a lot of the creative decisions. But before I get into asking her any specific questions or get to know her, I'll let her introduce herself and then we'll get started with the rest of the interview. So whenever you're ready.
All right. Well, I am Marcolina Santana. I go by Mars Guides. At one point, I went by Mars Cobia on social media and on YouTube. I, for some reason, don't consider YouTube social media. But yeah, you can find me at Mars Guides. And I transitioned over to Mars Guides because of my intention to provide guides and tools to people that want to understand social media from personal brands to businesses. And so what I've learned from my own experience of many years of just dabbling with media creation is that it's an internal journey. And in order to feel very comfortable with putting yourself out there, you kind of have to explore what you look like and what your values are and what your mission is. And you kind of need to ask yourself those deeper questions. I also find that businesses don't do that, or they don't do that in the beginning when developing a business like we once were trying to do. And so, those reflective conversations are what is going to determine what your next move is. And I have just a huge passion around all of it. And that's just what I do and where I'm at right now.
Yeah, no, and we'll get specifically in those details. We'll get to those specific details, especially in the ventures that we were trying to do when it came to a lot of our time in California where we all met. But like I said, that in due time, we'll get to those details. But before we get anywhere near to how we're talking about your business ventures, how Mars Guys started, how we were going to do a business and where you're currently at right now, let's get to know you a little bit better. Like I said, I know you very well, but I also don't know you very specifically. But for our listeners, for anybody who stumbles on this episode, why don't you tell us a little bit of where you grew up at, how life was there, and then we'll get into any specific questions as the conversation goes.
Okay, so I was born in upstate New York. I grew up in a very small area. Well, I would say, so Troy is large, okay? If you understand upstate New York and you understand Troy, you will understand Hoosick Street. And so Hoosick Street is kind of like this division of, it's really close to downtown Troy, and that's where most of the up and comingness of Troy is happening right now. And it's had a huge revival. Like my sister recently came to visit for my nephew's graduation, and she didn't even recognize downtown Troy. Now, on the other side of Hoosick Street is where people live in generally poverty. There's different ethnicities, that lived there, and I did not have any idea that that's where I lived growing up. I had plentiful, I had food to eat, I had clothes to put on, so I had no idea that I was without, And so I grew up there, and I grew up realizing that there was some sort of separation that people experienced in those types of societies. Eventually, as I was getting older, I noticed friends, extended family members gearing towards like trouble and whatnot. I had always been interested in like education, and I've always had my like head in a book somewhere. So, I wasn't kind of going down that path or interested in any of it. But I noticed that it would happen. Now, when I noticed those things, I still had love for these people, because these people were very giving and loving and misunderstood. And, I've just always recognized that as, this misunderstanding that people face depending on where they come from and how they express themselves. And so, eventually I got myself into college. I wasn't the first in my family. I have an older sister that went to college. I went to Hudson Valley, and then after I transferred to the College of St. Rose in Albany. At Hudson Valley, I went for independent studies. So I did not know what I wanted to do. But I was still very open to figuring it out. I said, I'm going to figure it out here in college. And so I went into a production studio, and there I knew, I'm like, this is what I want to do. I want to be in production, and I want to be a director. And so it was funny because in that class, they wanted to get me in front of the camera. And I was like, I don't want to be in front of the camera. I want to make the decisions. And it was like me and one other girl. And so eventually, after that class, I went to St. Rose. I transferred. They had a full, what is the word? Focus in communications and film and new media. I had some very interesting experiences being exposed to marketing, the power of news headlines. That made me really cringe on the inside, because of the amount of control that it possessed. And so I didn't really know where I wanted to go with it, but I just knew that I wanted to do it, and I was just always project oriented. At the end, a lot of the local opportunities were in news, and I was kind of like, no, I don't want to do this. I want to go to California, which is where we eventually met. But I wasn't there yet. And during that time in college, I also, at 14 years old, well, turning back before college, from 14 to 23 years old, I was working at a family restaurant. I had two uncles on my mom's side that had started restaurants in Troy. There was Hilltop Restaurant, and then there was Danjo Mari's, which was in Lansingburg, which is considered North Troy years ago. So I always grew up around my family being around restaurants, and I grew up in restaurants. And eventually, as I was getting older, I started helping with trainings. Eventually, when we wanted to like incorporate other people, even though at first it was just family, I would help with the menu. I designed the menu, excuse me, multiple times. And kind of like a little bit of the experience in the decor. I really didn't do too much like past that, because I was still considered young. And I think there's just hierarchies and families. And since I was the youngest, I wasn't going to step on the toes of anyone else. I created a little commercial that's somewhere out there on YouTube, for the restaurant many years ago. And yeah, so even though I was there, I just always had the desire to escape. I wanted to escape New York winters. I wanted to escape serving and having forced conversations. And I just wanted to be in production in the creative space and like the exciting things like that. So eventually my uncle retired, my sister and I took over. She was also expecting, and she said, you know, like she wasn't really seeing the profits of it. There were a lot of expenses when you run a restaurant. It's just poured right back into a restaurant. It was a diner. It had regulars and it did not have marketing. And I wasn't yet into marketing. So it was kind of just like barely making it. And so she was ready to be out, and I was really just sticking around for her. So I said, whenever you want to be done, we're done. And which sucks, but you learn a lot coming from a family restaurant. I will tell you, no other restaurant I've worked in since was anything like working with a family restaurant. When you all have the same values, you won't get that experience anywhere else. And so we were working together. We ended up deciding to close it down just so that she could have her baby and I could do something else. My sister had a situation one day, and it was an emergency, and I ended up having to be the cook, the server, and all the things. And I go to the freezer or the fridge, and everything was frozen. It just had like a malfunction. It froze everything. The milk jugs that we used to buy in glass broke, and it was just like everywhere. I'm like, what are we doing? Staying, like, what can I cook? Everything is frozen. This is just a disastrous day. I'm going to close. I'm going to close. And then the landlord, he used to come for lunch with his dad all the time. And he said, oh, why aren't you, are you not going to stay open? I'm like, I'm not staying open. Everything's frozen. Like, you can see it. And so I made this big girl decision. I felt like such a big girl that day because I was the boss. And I closed it down, and then I went online and I looked for another serving job. And I found this restaurant, Texas de Brazil. I literally don't know exactly where I found it, but I went there, and they're a corporate restaurant, and I immediately went physically to bring my application. So then they opened up to have an interview. So I went from dining, family restaurants, and kind of just like the lack and support that restaurants really need, to then going to corporate. They have it all. They have the training systems, they have the resources, they're ready to go, they're flying, they're making tons of money. And I didn't even know how to say Pinot Grigio or Cabernet Sauvignon. I didn't know how to say any of it. And I remember taking my first test because you had to go 10 days to learn everything, and you had to do a table side test. And I was so nervous that I blanked out. Like, I was blank. I could not think. I was not well. And luckily they were patient with me, and they're like, okay, when you feel ready, we can do it again. So I did everything. I think that's like the high achiever personality. When you were like book smart and then the real world, I think I just had like a bit of a shock there. Eventually I went a few years there, and I worked up to being the trainer. And as I was the trainer, I realized how different people needed to be spoken to differently in order to learn. And I always met them where they were. Even if they thought they were great, I just knew that they didn't know the stuff that they needed to know for this job. And I would just like walk them through it all. And I probably trained around 70 people in over the years there. And I met one of my good friends that she's from Albania, and she didn't know a bit of English, and it was an honor to look out for her because I knew in many different ways that she wasn't going to be seen at, she was going to be kind of isolated by people's behaviors. and instead of nurtured and kind of like welcomed and supported. And so, I wouldn't just naturally do that. And so, now she's an engineer and doing great. And so I went there. Eventually, I was trying to transfer with that company to California. That failed. And that was a huge bummer to my pride at the time, where I believed like everything could just like happen for me and whatnot. And then ironically, my partner at the time ends up getting stationed in California. And so then like California did become an option all of the sudden. And it was okay. I was kind of like reading the signs. I said, okay, I didn't expect that one. And this was where like more of a spiritual shift started to happen in me, because I didn't foresee that. And then it happened. And then I was just trying to go with the flow. Also, I had a miscarriage in 2016. And I always mention that because that was another moment that started the spiritual like shift, or at least my interest in what our spirit is made up of and how do we stay strong and persevere and keep our head up. So after that, I was like, okay, well, if I'm not going to have a kid, I need to figure out like what kind of career could be super stable. So I kind of left behind all the film and creating and the passion for designing any sort of thing like that. I had no way of connecting that world to restaurant world. And so I was like, I'm just going to go to pre-med. I've always been smart. I'm just going to go to pre-med. And then I was in El Centro, and then I went to their community college, started doing their prerequisites there. I was keeping my head down as usual and studying every day at the base cafe. I'd be there like drawing all these awesome diagrams that I still have somewhere stashed. And I was just kind of like taking it one step at a time. Then at some point, I brought my homework to D&D where we met, which is Dungeon and Dragons. And our good friend Garcia was kind of like, what are you doing? Why don't you come play with us? And so I was like, all right, cool. Like, I've really felt like officially invited. It wasn't just like I was the plus one. So it was like, okay, like it was very I think when you go from being in a relationship and you are a plus one, you don't understand how different that feels. And so, we started playing D&D, and I didn't have like this adult group that wasn't drinking. Like, I had always seen people like drink or just do dumb stuff most of the time. And, this seems like just a genuine fun time that I like began to look forward to it. And then eventually that's when Garcia had his protein idea, and we started formulating what we could create in that. And I was like, okay, like marketing sparked in me. I was like, okay, like I can bring in all my nutrition education, my private passions. I can bring that in, and we can market it this way, and we can do this package this way. It was like something just like was born inside of me. And then COVID, and I was kind of like, I didn't want to come back here. Garcia and Lily extended their home to me, and I was going to go there. And out of duty, there were people that had to come back here. And I was like, okay, I'll go back and see my family. And I'll bring them back because they need a way back. So I drove the, I don't know, 6 days it takes to get back in a big old Yukon. And I remember in that Yukon, I was like, I want a car that has the two with the AC on both sides. The AC, I want a car with this feature. And I drove 6 days back. or it was like 4, I feel like it was 6 days. But something was telling me I wasn't going to go back. And I was not really accepting it, but I was feeling it. And so I came back. My mom has a home with 2 apartments. And so the upstairs apartment had been where I lived. So it was still kind of like unfurnished, had a broken old couch. And my mom would try and tell me, oh, bring the bed. She had an extra bed. She's like, bring the bed upstairs. I'm like, don't worry about it. I'm going to sleep on this couch. Everything's fine. Everything's fine. I'm going to just figure it all out. You know, she had roof leaks. She just had a lot of adult things that were, I wasn't ready for adult things, you know? And she had always been trying to teach me, like, this is what you have to do with the house. I wasn't ready for it all. And I don't know if I was like really officially going to go in this direction that I ended up in. I don't think it was so obvious to me. To me, I was like, I love to make videos. I do now enjoy being on camera. You know, can I get paid for this? Like, can this be something I can do? And eventually I realized a lot of businesses kind of need you to do this stuff for them. And it's better that you're in a position, in my opinion, it's better that you're in a position to explain what you're going to deliver than have someone ask you to deliver something that fails, because it'll still have your face on it. And so why give them the creative power and the messaging power, but yet they want to use your face and your voice? And so I was kind of like really uncomfortable with that. And I was like, all right, I have to spend some time and develop what I'm willing to do and what that package looks like. So for like 8 months, I would go to this cafe every day, even if it was cold and there's only one spot by the fire. I would go and I would spend time on like developing my first package. It took me about 8 months, which I feel is like birthing a child, and just figuring it all out. Like, what am I promising? What kind of contracts do I need? How am I going to explain this? Does it make money? Is it scalable? And I'm sure, and there would always be distractions. Like mom had an appointment, all these things. And it was like spiritually like tearing me apart, because I really just wanted to focus, but still life was demanding things around me.
So hold on a second there. Let me cut you off on that moment. So you're hitting a very specific apex that I want to ask about in a little bit. But like that was a lot in the sense of like that happened that I wasn't aware of. Like I said, so it's been approximately close to 4 years at this point since we all last saw each other in California. But let me ask you this very specific thing, and you mentioned it with your Albanian friend when you guys were working at Texas de Brazil, right?
Yes.
So and it's something that you didn't mention is the fact that yes, you grew up in a Latino Hispanic what do you call it, family. You're Puerto Rican. I know that. Obviously, our listeners don't know that. But like, let's touch on that very specific portion, because it's something that a lot of people don't realize within the, I don't want to say an assimilation thing, within the way that we're able to actually empathize and bring people in and just easily include them. I just want to say like that, being and I think it's just an ethnically cultural kind of thing.
True.
So with your experience seeing how your friend, how she, like you said, she didn't speak much English. She was there, you guys working, like what were some of the things that stood out to you with her that you maybe saw while you were growing up in what do you call it, in New York?
Well, I would say that generally speaking in New York, there's a lot of behaviors that are out of survival. And out of survival, there's a lot of cattiness, especially amongst women. And there's just like a boundary or a boulder that people start to put even to like get to know you or anything. And I think that's why I was always kind of reserved, because I would let people decide if they wanted to open the door for me and let me in, because I already kind of seen and witnessed those kind of boulders in life. And so I don't specifically recall if someone had. I remember this one thing where she was walking and she was fairly new, and she has long, beautiful black hair, and she's tall and slim, and she's just beautiful. And I remember like somebody had said something in a judgmental tone towards her. And in my brain, I've always been like, but we don't know her. You know, we literally do not know her. And I mean, she has an amazing story. And so when I just felt that judgment of that person, like I wasn't at a stage in my life where I would verbalize what that person is doing wrong, where I am now. But in those times when I was younger, I would just kind of, I'm not sure why you're hating on this person for no reason. But yeah, so I just went, and I didn't know what personality she was going to have. I think every girl I've ever been kind to, I never know what personality they're going to have. But really, their personality, for me, it shows over time. Like the fruits of who they are show over time. And some people are presenting a fruit of things, and other people actually have, a spiritual fruit. And she had that, so.
Yeah, and it's very true. It's very true. And like I said, I wanted to ask that specifically because how you mentioned both with the interactions, how you had with your coworkers growing up, just in general, in your family. Like you said, you're the youngest. You're the youngest. Psychologically speaking, you're not supposed to step out of bounds. You're not supposed to be critical of anything. And yet, at the same point, I don't want to say you're sheltered, but your lack of experience, how it sounds during that time frame, is still very limited. You're an adult. You're making your own decisions. But when it came down to I guess the nuances of being a grown up, that's where you were a little bit lost, is what it seems like.
Oh,
yeah. And this is where I'm going with that. So leading with like how your interaction with your friend was, and then our future interaction with us before we even became friends. Like I said, that's one thing that I noticed about how when we all got together the very first time, quiet, reserved, really set aside, really essentially like the wallflower mentality, kind of just observe and not interact. If somebody interacts with me, it's going to be out of their volition, and they're going to make the decision to interact with me. And I understand that. I understand that because it's one of those things that I've done myself, but have been told otherwise. And I don't know who, but everybody has told me that in a lot of ways. Like, but where I'm going with this is that you're very right, and it's very true what you said about You're very right, and it's very true about what you said about how the interactions tend to happen. A lot of people come in with that generalized, sympathetic approach, but it's not friendships. It's not sincerity. It's just like, what can you offer me that nobody else can offer me that hasn't already offered it? And then in the inverse is the exact same thing. And like I said, this all has a point to it. We've talked. It goes in circles. It goes in circles. But it leads back into the way that the whole situation with interactions in business and what do you call it? And any type of ventures that have to have a lot of personal interactions is like, and you made that realization now at that point when you returned. It's like, you can't be sitting back and just observing if you want to be productive. And legitimately, that's why I asked that, because like I said, we've known each other for a while, and those are the nuances, the things that I didn't understand or didn't know with that, which goes into my next question. So you returned back, you've already created your entire your portfolio, your initial portfolio for your venture. What was the next step in that process once you had to now use these new interaction skills, this new realization with marketing yourself and the content creation aspect of becoming yourself a business?
Okay, so the next step, I went to a marketing event for the Hispanic commerce in the area. It was a marketing event at the restaurant that I was working at. And so I was like, should I do this? Because it's going to be really awkward if someone blows up my spot that I'm also serving here. But I was like, whatever. At the end of the day, I'm just going to put myself out there. And so lo and behold, I won't get off topic. Lo and behold, I'm at this little mixer. It's by the bar. And, I'm trying to see again where I can interact with people. Some of the interactions are kind of just like friendly, and here's my business card and whatnot. And social media is so misunderstood. And people have had a lot of disappointing experiences. And I remember that day also, there was a woman that asked me, oh, who are you with? And what company are you working for? And I'm like, no, I own a business and I'm with myself. And it was just, and I still reflect on that because I love that happened. But I was getting a mocktail by the bar, and there was a gentleman, and he decided to spark up conversation with me, and in a very, very friendly way. And he was hyping up his girlfriend, and he said, you have to meet her. And so he walks me over. He ends up being the person to connect me with my first client. And it was a founder herself for a bilingual Montessori school. And so we ended up like kicking it off in such a beautiful way because we're both founders. We both love the feeling of being bilingual and the like superpower element of what that instills in children, how it makes you more empathetic. Like there's just so many things that we connected with. And I think what she loved about me was I tried to do a lot of work that didn't require her to do too much. Like she could do what she had to do and I'll do what I have to do. And we were just like supporting each other. And I think that a lot of businesses, if you're going to go ahead and develop a business where you're truly helping people. Because I've paid into things that are super branded where I'm not getting help. I'm just getting a branded affiliation thing. Oh, I can hype up their name. I'm like, but you're not helping me. It's actually really hard to unsubscribe to whatever the heck you were selling me. And these are things that seem super duper official. And I might be less official, but I am there. I'm available. I will adjust quickly. And I keep open communication. Like there are certain things that are way more valuable that everyone has. They just have to stick to it. That's all they have to do. And so she was my first client. I met her there and we ended up just setting a meeting, and we were both reliable people, and that's it.
And I remember that specifically too, because that was when I had reached out initially when I had started the podcast, when I was getting a lot more, really investing more time into it. And I do remember you saying a lot of good things specifically about the school itself, because that was one of the things that led me with that question, was the fact that it's like, I remember you mentioning a very good interaction and a very really relatable thing that happened that a lot of people don't see. Is like, and like I said, like I mentioned before, when you become intertwined in this whole thing of businesses, like you mentioned, like it's as flashy as it can be. The marketing can be perfect, but what are you really offering me? And in that same, with the exact same thing with the previous question for yourself, is like you yourself, you're marketing yourself. What can you offer to the people that you're marketing yourself towards? Like you are your own business. You've become the business itself. you're not only the face, and there's a guarantee to the face because there's nobody else to turn to, but also in that same regard, there's nobody for you to point the finger at and say, like, that's not me. Sorry, this is my boss. No, scratch that. And I know you, like I said, I know you specifically for that. It's like, you're not going to take that laying down. You're going to be like, hell no, I'm the boss. What do you need? How can I help you? And then what is it that we need to fix in this regard? So here's my next question with that then. So you created your marketing, you now have one of your initial clients, and how did that expand even more, especially once I kind of want to say, with also doing at the same time your creative content on YouTube, and then kind of I guess pivoting over to the business side and the marketing side. How was that different, and how did that affect your content creation? Because it's like I said, it's something really really unique, right? You see a lot of people either reaching out in the social media space and the content creators and all that, reaching for marketing teams and people, but here you are literally taking that whole aspect and not only just applying it to yourself, but to other ventures.
Well, during the time, excuse me, during the time that I was producing content for clients, I wasn't really producing content for myself, for the reason that I was still kind of building portfolio, but at the same time, it was a little bit difficult in the sense that I'm working with a school that I love their message and mission, but there's also children involved in the content. So I'm not going to fight for any types of rights for resharing that content or leveraging my own business through that platform. It was just like, she knows she's going to end up being my referral in those regards. I couldn't use that content as more like portfolio type of stuff. However, I did help them in many other regards, because one of the things that I built into my package was strategy sessions. And our strategy session, she ended up really realizing that I knew what I was going to do as far as social media. So then she would just ask me a bunch of other questions, as far as, how do you reach out and email? What kind of language should you use there? We are presenting a budget increase. How are we presenting this budget increase? We need funding. Every problem that she was facing, we would talk about it. And I really didn't mind, because my brain just starts thinking of ways to solve and present the information. It's just like, I have a response. And if I don't have a response, I don't even think there was a time I didn't have a response. I would just always kind of have a response. And she would just write everything down. And there would be a lot of things that I would just kind of extend myself to, whether it be like an email marketing design, a proposal that I've put together. We ended up creating, for tours, we ended up creating an experience, because marketing is so layered. That's why marketing strategy is not just what you see, but it's what you get. It's just like a person. It's not just the outside, it's the inside experience. So in order to market properly, if I'm going to market an open house, what is that open house going to feel like when they're walking through? And I knew that she knew I was not necessarily salesy, but I am going to try and get to the sale a little bit faster. All the cordial stuff, it's too scary and risky for businesses. So it's the only reason why the cordial exists is because somebody doesn't want to bridge the gap in education and access. If you can bridge the education and access, then the sale will happen faster. So, we would kind of figure out the whole experience. I said, with the guides, they can do this because they're not considered teachers, they're considered guides. And that's also where like guides ended up coming to my name, because I felt as though I was guiding in many ways. So the teachers, we would plan out what they would say in the rooms, how much time they would be there, so that we could each give each other feedback and not just be like something orchestrated without analytics behind it. But yeah, that was that experience.
No, and it sounds like it's a lot of really very specific focus that I think, like I said, from what I've seen, one from both YouTube marketing, the marketing skills, their entire whole venture, like on expanding to be able to make your social media, is like your explanation is honestly a lot more clear and it's more direct. It's like we're cut just as much as I can cut out from that is just like we're literally cutting out the BS. This is what you need. This is what we're doing, and this is what's going to happen. Don't believe this other portion because I'm not mentioning it, and it's not because I'm not mentioning it. It's like it doesn't exist. Don't fall for that. So it's like, and that's a very unique perspective that I think even talking to like other business, actually I want to say more like marketing and strategy consultants. I want to say it like that, except not for myself, but just in passing. I've had that conversation with them, and that's one of the things that I did notice both with like going to job fairs or even talking or even going to like local events here in Virginia is that exact same thing. It's like there's always that heavy sales pitch, but never a very specific thing on like, hey, we need you to come back in at a future date. Why don't we set up an appointment and stuff? It's like, no, it's like you literally said like, hey, I'm going to meet you on this date. I'm going to give you this info and this is what's going to happen. You can decide how you want to pay for it.
All of it.
And it's a legit thing. And that's a legit thing where you don't see it. And like I said, you really do cut out a lot of the BS, and that's outlines both with your personality, but also in the same way with the product, the product that you're presenting. Now, after that, have you had any issues with any other businesses or ventures where it's like just that strategy didn't work? They didn't feel reassured, because I know for sure it's going to happen.
Yeah.
So just no reassurance, no reassurance, no sympathy, and then just no confidence in what you were doing.
This is going to be a hard thing to explain without inputting,
names,
personal opinion and initial hurt, because I'm still, I kind of hate when people want to be like, I'm still a person, but you're going to initially see that this is not a good idea when a person wants to back out of a contract with you. It's business is literally relationships. And if you understand a relationship with yourself, with a higher power, with a partner, you're going to understand business. If not, you're not going to understand it. So for me, I very much knew what it takes to be in a relationship. So I knew what it's going to take to be in a business, meaning I will be very giving, generous. I will support in the best ways possible. But sometimes the best way possible is, even if you're making the wrong decision, I have to let you make the wrong decision. And so definitely I thought initially with my package that it was going to be something that I thought year 2 would be that I scale away and I again become the educator. And then they can have, teach someone else within. This would allow me to scale and work with more companies. So this first year, I was like, okay, I will do all the legwork of what does it take to get from concept all the way to produce content, whether that be graphic, photo, video, reel, proposal, anything. I'll do all of it to see what I can learn. What I learned is that I can do it. That's really the extent of it, and that I could do a lot more. But I thought the second year would be something that I kind of source out a little bit, and let them start to implement their people. But what I've noticed is that if you make something look easy, people will think that they can do it themselves. And I mean, it's painful to watch people try and do the things that you were doing that were 20 and 25 steps deep, but they're doing it in 5 or 6 and thinking that, and I think that they know it's not the same, but at some point in their mind, somebody in the decision-making process decided, okay, we'll just have to figure it out. And I know, for example, the founder that I mentioned, it was not her, because she has such a strong belief in herself as a founder that she extends to me, that I knew that that wouldn't be something that she would be basing off of like wanting to do more herself. She already had a lot on her plate. It would just be that, you know, where her business as an education facility, you have to support other salaries, other needs. And so like there were other things that she just needed to focus on. And marketing feels like luxury. It feels like the extra skincare. It feels like the extra supplement. It doesn't feel like a basic need. So if you don't allocate that money, there are gonna be times where you're like, I'm gonna do 6 months without. I'm gonna do a year without because I just need to fix something foundational. And so that's one thing that I didn't foresee. Like I did in a way. I knew that I was making it look a little bit too easy, not specifically for that client, but for another. But you know, I thought it was a good pivoting point because I knew that even if I scaled and kept just getting more and more people, I wasn't going to feel satisfied just doing a lot of work. Even if I was making a lot of money, I wasn't going to be satisfied. I'd be trapped because more of my time is trapped. So then I was like, okay, I need to figure out a way to always protect my time because that's the real asset. And I need to give faster access and faster education. If they want to do it themselves, let them do it right with my guidance. And that's where I started to take it as an opportunity and pivot. But yeah, you definitely don't foresee you do foresee the human nature. Even in a relationship, you can foresee the human nature of what a relationship, like the bad things that could happen. You could foresee that, but you have to understand it's two parties. So, you know, some business is going to pour in and invest in luxury, and that because that's a priority to them. Others are going to sacrifice on it, and that's just part of the game.
Yeah, and it's very true. It's very true how you say it with that sense in regard to like that relationship aspect of it. Is like there's a lot of give and take that people still tend to not recognize when it comes to that. And from my, like I said, from my perspective, it's when you go into the marketing aspect of it, when you go into that whole into the publication of anything that you're trying to expand on, it becomes a lot more muddied because, like I said, you make it look too easy. People will think it's, hey, immediately. But that's the other thing that I want to lead into with that is like, you've been doing this close to 10 years at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Videos. Yeah.
Yeah. So close to 10 years. Like, and it's like, it's one of those things where it's just like, you know, I've reached out to you, like having started the podcast close to about 5 years ago now at this point, and literally working on my second full scale production, still self-produced and everything. It's one of those things where that it sticks to me with how your basic information, just like your basic guidance that you gave me when I first started the first episodes, and I shifted it over to like the other passion project that I have with talking to music artists and trying to expand it. It's like, hey, you're gonna make it look easy, and I think that's what I've been seeing in that sense. Now that you're putting it like this, is like, damn, it was so easy for me to be able to start a second project without any problem. But at the same time, it's like, look at the entire experience that I've had for these past 4 or 5 years. In the same regard, you have 10 years, close to 10 years of experience of managing, planning, putting in operations, putting in that legwork, and then also building those connections and relationships in your surroundings, and then expanding outwards towards that. So it's really, really specific that you put it in that sense. Now,
Mm-hmm.
with that in mind, you're, and I'll say it like this, and this is by no means an insult. In any regard, nobody is ever a professional because professionals don't exist. It's only the experience. I've seen a lot of people, and and like I said, I've seen the guides. I go on there like every so often. It was like, and this is, like I said, this is a bit more of an opinionated question. How much of a difference does it make to you or to your client if you see professional photographer, professional marketing, professional versus self-starter or what do you call it, independent? You know, because because I know this, and I will never change this in my life. I will never I will never put myself out as a professional. I am an independent producer, artist, and creator. Period. Because that's what I work with.
Mm-hmm.
So how does that, like I said, back to the actual question, how does that change being, even though, you know, the quality isn't there to be considered professional, it's a professional versus an independent title in their portfolio or in their marketing?
I've gone against both in for different clients. I've gone against let's say there's not too much of independent people out here. I've seen some people on social media. The independents that I've seen, I don't know their price. I don't really keep track of where they're going or what they're doing. Everyone has different goals as far as like independence. I think that a lot of agencies around here didn't expect me to come out with a course and me to kind of try and collapse wanting to sell services. Because at the end of the day, with AI and everything, I'm sorry to say the services is not going to stick around. And if you're scaling, you're in danger because you're promising salaries to people to do things that really a lot of people are doing things mediocrely. They don't understand sales through videos. They don't understand a lot of things. And it's very obvious to me when I watch the video what they're selling. And so when I watch the independents, I mean, to go back to the independents, everybody has different goals, not super intimidated in that sense. I think there's an abundance of clients, you know, to make ends meet. And it's really going to come down to systems and efficiency in that regards. And then in the other regards, as far as going against agencies, because I've gone against agencies with budgets, what would I say? From, yeah, with budgets probably 7 times more than what I was offering. So in that sense, you know, I was winning the value game, right? I mean, the price game. That's not where I want to be, but also at the end of the day, I don't have to sell a team. You know, so everybody has different strengths. You're going to sell a team, but I mean, at the end of the day, everyone is always going to be cost efficient, always going to be cost efficient. So with the agency stuff and going against those kind of professionals, I mean, I feel for them for the struggles that they're going to have to face because there's definitely a lot shifting in marketing right now. And I would rather put my time as a founder towards getting the projects to the clients than spending time monitoring my staff to be like me, because I know that with my experience, it's a lot to pour into someone else. And it's really hard in any staffing situation to find people that are just willing to learn aggressively and to contribute aggressively. Usually when they're getting paid hourly, those are not components that you're getting. So why would I prioritize scaling if I'm not going to get another me? But yeah, it's a very interesting world. But it was a pleasure to go against some people and bids and whatnot. It was a learning experience. There was a time I was proposing a video production for my sister's police academy, and they were having like a shift in leadership, so we ended up like not hearing back. I would have loved for that to work out because it was just more like traditional video production. But I was trying to like, also propose some social media stuff because everyone right now needs social media. Everyone. They just they don't get it. They don't get what the platform is capable of doing. They don't get boosting, I will say. And that's one of the first things you want to get as a business is get the boosting.
No, it's true. So I'll even piggyback on that. I'll even put in my 2 cents with that. It's just like, so me and like I said, so us being in the same general age range, we still remember seeing the changes that happened with television once marketing went digital. That's the biggest thing. Once marketing went digital in the late 2000s, going to 2010 to 2015, I still remember that a lot of the consumable levels of entertainment was still both mainly centered on Netflix. Hulu was just somewhat making a big of a splash, but everything was still in that late night prime time spot where you're still tuning into channels, you're still tuning into networks to be able to, I guess, manage and see the marketing. So there's still the self-produced infomercials. There's still the what do you call it, the half an hour spots in between an episode. But once that shifted and you started to see what the social media landscape in itself became and did for marketing and for product placement, that's where you kind of tend to learn and see it. It's like, man, this really is a game changer. And even more so now, to where it kind of pisses me off. And I'm not going to lie. It kind of pisses me off how reels work, because I'll be sitting there enjoying a decent reel, and then next thing you know, I'm 5 seconds in and I just look down and I see sponsored. I'm like I just fell for a freaking commercial. I literally just fell for a commercial. But in that sense though, it's like, that's sneaky. That's the literal power of marketing. That we had this conversation a couple years back, that I told you I don't like marketing. I hate it to an extent. It's the bane of my personal existence just because of how it works. But but with more experiences, and I still hate it. I don't have a love for marketing in any way, but I do understand it. And then it's one of those things where, regardless of how much hatred or malice you have towards something specific like that, it's better to learn how it works and either try to work a good counter towards it, or you're going to have to assimilate with it. And reality is, that's where a lot of it comes down to, like you said, the social media. Many local businesses, many international products, or even just up and coming startups, they don't have that social media marketing team, or even just an individual where like I said, even with a couple of the nonprofits that I'm working with, it's a little difficult to even know that they're in the social media space, because one of them has literally told me, hey, we don't have a social media person. It's difficult. It's like, we're relying on you. You're doing your podcast, but like, we're relying on you to get these interviews on veterans. It's about the deported veterans, but it's like, we're kind of relying on you. And I'm not saying it's like, hey, keep doing what you're doing. It's like, no, but it's like, it goes to an extent. It's like, one, the affordability, the capacity, and the affordability, the capacity of it, and the extent that they can actually reach, which is the biggest thing. So, but that's for nonprofits. That's a nonprofit. That's a whole different tangent to like somebody who actually is running a business, running a product, is making an entire brand with branding and deals. So it's interesting.
I will say that, going back to when I was at St. Rose and I went to a news class in the headlines, and I also went to a marketing class, and they were talking about colors and the way colors make people feel. It all made me sick too. Okay. it wasn't until I went to this one class, which was, um, it's got like a long name, but it's kind of like the it was the beginning of Facebook at those in those times, but it was kind of like the analytics behind what your creativity is. And so I had this professor and he was like explaining the analytics behind social media and that back end and that insight that you get on the efficiency. And so that's where I was like, I was so excited in that specific class. I thought I was excited producing content, being behind the camera, like designing a project. When I was in that class, it was like everything in the world made sense because I'm like, now you can take something creatively and you can understand it from its being consumed. You can't get that information if you go to a museum and you see something unless they have cameras up tracking like your eyes or some sort of body language interaction. They have no way of understanding you as the consumer and what you're doing. And that's where like the swipes and if you stay for the video all come into like, okay, how efficient is this video? You get to gauge the efficiency, and that's why you can't have a big bias in the creative part. You can't have this like live or die, this is great, and like I know that it is great. Like just let the like does the audience get it? If it doesn't, rework it. Just humbly go through the process of reworking it, because if you're really about the people, then just figure it out for the people and don't make it about like trust me, I love to create stuff for me, but at the end of the day in business, it's about everyone. It's not about just me. So I get like your hatred towards it, and that I just think that it's just about learning. And also there was someone I came across recently on TikTok, and he like rants and it's almost like a crash out as they call it, but the way he was expressing himself was so great because his vocabulary was amazing, and he was giving this kind of like conspiracy but also I mean, yeah. And it's fun to listen to conspiracies, but he was giving this conspiracy, but he was also giving the you need to possess power in this too, because I think that sometimes people just want to get lost in the conspiracy of it all. They want to get lost in the inefficiency. And I also mentioned a conspiracy that I had on TikTok comments recently. I was like talking just last night. I was like, I think like what if bots are in the TikTok comments, like incentivizing people to comment. And the reason why I started to have that conspiracy is because I make a lot of Instagram content. Do I see a lot of interaction? Not on the front end. On the back end with the analytics, I get to learn more. Thank goodness for the back end. But from the front end, I see a lot of isolation. I see a lot of people not wanting to interact. And what I loved about that guy and his crash out was he was kind of talking about the human behaviors and, how platforms and having access to video is kind of like, obviously you can get a lot of data and it can be used for bad, but if you understand you have this tool, right? And it could be for good or bad, just like money, just like weapons. It's the same thing, but ultimately you yield that power. And so like that was the end of his crash out, but I'll have to send it to you because I think you'll enjoy it.
I mean, you know my sense of humor, so and like I said, and then no disrespect with the whole hating on marketing. It's like I said, for me, but like I said, we've had this conversation. It's like for me, it's more of a psychological and a philosophical sense, but in the what do you call it, in a productive and what do you call it, and in a productive sense like that, like you said, the back end really does make a difference because even more and more, like I said, I'm not trying to reach people for the views. I'm trying to reach people for the message. And when you're talking about the back end, looking at the analytics, the clicks, the likes, the view time, the interactions in itself, is like it's really spread out super thin depending on what you're providing and what you're doing. Like I've had, like I said, the amount of interactions, and I'll speak because we didn't even talk about this before we started recording, and I should have told you about this. The level of interactions I've gotten more from the 3 episodes so far that I've done on the 3 independent artists that I've done for the second podcast have been exponentially 20 times more than I have gotten on this socially conscious interviews, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it makes a big difference between the level of marketing, who your audience is, who your audience is, and that's the biggest difference. And it took me a little bit to kind of realize to that extent, where I was even talking to my wife and I told her, like, you know what, I think this second podcast is just going to be a lot more popular than the second one. It just is. And it took me a little bit of like rethinking that. I knew it was going to work, but it made me realize that, damn it, it's gonna fucking work. That's the worst part about it. But like I said, and not in a bad way, because it's like, look, it really truly boils down to a lot of specifics with it. But what I was able to see, and you can correct me in any way here, and it's like your audience matters, the message that you're trying to portray, your production and presentation, and then also your guest, and then who that guest it has relation to. It's that that what do you call the 6 degrees of separation. And like I said, these 2 of the 3 interviews so far are related, are not related. They're connected to each other because they're both independent artists. They have their own followings, each individual, but they're in the thousands. Like I said, I've gotten more clicks and interacts over that because it's like, hey, versus what I'm doing right now. And interacting with, I mean, relatively unknowns, people that I'm close with, or just people that I think their stories are interesting, is like, who are they sharing it to, and like, what's their reach? But that's the point, is like, it's not, for this one, it's not about the reach, it's about the message. Versus the other podcast, it's the reach, it's not the message. So I've essentially gone full circle in my own hypocrisy, I'll put it like that. Because here I am literally using a podcast to promote artists in something that I dislike to a certain level, but I have to use it. But that's out of passion and for the love of the music. That's the reason why. Like you said, it's for the good, it's for the greater. Like, I believe in these guys. That's why I'm doing that's why I'm doing this level of marketing for them.
Yeah, the thing about video work is it's a game of leaving a footprint. It's leaving a footprint. It's leaving something else. Like, it could be found at any time. And I think that sometimes with like the exposure of virality or numbers, the numbers game, I ended up making a reel, and I didn't know how many people didn't know this stuff, but I was like, I just want to do it because I know as a marketer that I can go and post stuff, and it's not a lack of people not being interested. It's not a lack of followers. It is just simply the lack of boosting the illusion, like this, to talk specifically about social media. You can boost an illusion to create, oh, everyone follow me because I've invested. The truth is I've invested thousands of dollars to get these numbers to convince you to follow me. And I think that shows that people need to check in with themselves of what they're following, like, and why they're following it, and what, they're pursuing. And obviously it's going to put more pressure on us because we are trying our best to crank out the content to stay relevant, but still trying to protect our private life. I think that that's where the real pressure comes. But it's also an honor to be able to dial back in and say, like, hey, I'm here today. There will be days where I'll post 3 videos. I'm like, you'll see it when you see it. If it'll come up on your feed tomorrow, whatever. All I know is I put the time today to post, and I'll see you in 2 weeks. Like, I deserve my own private life. But I just want there to be more education on just get out there and be creative if you want to be creative, if you want other people to have their voice out there. If you're going to figure out funding, then figure that out eventually. If you're going to figure out working with clients like myself, like where I'm working with people, then figure that out. And understand it's just going to take conversations, because people don't have had, well, people have had different experiences. They're not going to be right where you need them when you want them. They're not going to be fully ready just yet, but at least like what you're providing can be so new and real that they'll just remember when they need it. And that's kind of my goal. Slowly but surely.
No, and that's very true. And I think this is actually a pretty good area for the closure. So let's talk about that last bit that you're saying, is like with being at the place where you're needed when it's ready to be found, essentially in that sense, is that Mars Guides. So Mars Guides itself, what is the product that, what are the services that you offer? Like I said, this is your window for both, like I said, my audience, your audience, or anybody who stumbles on this video to be able to find you, locate you, and, you know, just literally get to learn the portion of the journey that took you from how you were starting in marketing and now literally running your own business.
Well, I'll say Mars Guides has two levels, but it has a personal it's starting to for Mars Guides, it has a division between business and personal branding, because marketing happens on both sides. Now, business, obviously there's more people involved in the whole process. But that's sometimes a little bit more straightforward and favorable. At the end of the day, people want to modernize. They're not going to find a lot of people like myself that are interested in video production in short form and in social media, because those are three things that usually people get good at one. And I'm always learning in all three. And so generally when I can go from point A, which is what can this be about? Who can it reach? What can it look like? And how does it have to look? And third, what things are we going to leverage on social media to like get it out there? And then and I always leave it up to them, and up to your budget, you can boost and you can send this off. But this first stage of developing the asset, that's where I come in, and I shorten the time span where you don't have to sit there with a ton of different meetings and drive yourself crazy with it. And then on the personal element, I'm starting to kick off this kind of education for, I want to say young females right now. I don't really know yet or when I will introduce like young males, because I have a ton of young nephews that I want to make sure that they understand social media as well. I think that children really have an illusion of wanting to be YouTubers, wanting all this fame, and they have no idea how, like, production is a real industry, and it's a hard industry that takes a lot of back end work and takes a lot of time. And like, you can't just love the front end of it all. You got to learn the back end, and the back end is really going to show you what you're made of. And that's where a lot of people need a lot of nurturing of who they even are. And so like, I've gone through that journey of what do I want to represent online? What do I feel comfortable putting out there? Can I be a little silly? You know, I had to explore those things. And so I'm starting to develop that other side where I can help people understand themselves more. And if their goal is to be on social media or to help other people through video, then they can do that. But I feel like it's essential for them to understand themselves first.
No, and that's a good way to be able to put it out there. Like I said, there's the spectrum to the way that the whole entire marketing aspect works. And like you mentioned very specifically, there's your private life at this point, and then there's your online life. There's going to be a way to be able to meld them together, and people don't understand it. And like you said, you have to love the back end. You literally have to love what happens behind the scenes before you can enjoy that 30, 45-second viral clip and not recognize that it probably took about 30 minutes to try to get that right take with the right audio in the right lighting with the correct words with the it's a pain in the ass, and it's a pain in the ass. So it's like I said, just like you with marketing, I've been doing audio production engineering for close to 10, 15, actually, yeah, close to 10 or 15 years now. So, so like I said, so from being an independent artist to literally just doing production inside, and even one of the interviews that's actually going to probably come out before I post this episode is one of those conversations I had with an actual audio engineer for the other podcast. Is learning that your craft is very specific, and just because you don't know the ins and outs of what it is that you're doing at the moment doesn't mean you can't learn it. And you really summarize that very well, especially.
Yeah. So, yeah. You can just figure it out along the way. There's always more to figure out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, honestly, Marco, I think this is it. This is a pretty good way to be able to close it off. So just like I said, just for the audience. So where can we find you? Where can they reach out to you on the social media, on anywhere online?
Well, if you want to reach out with questions, just, I mean, if you have Instagram, it's Mars_guides, Mars with a Z. If you would prefer my business account for video production, or I mean, literally any kind of question with social media, then it's Mars Productions NY. Again, Mars with a Z. And it's pretty much what I mentioned about like consulting. If you have a company, if you have a product launch, you're just interested in like what is going to be the feel, what is going to be the reels. If you want to hire influencers, you're like, okay, what kind of script should we put out there? Who do we want to reach? Why do we want to reach? Like, if you just want things broken down for you, I can figure all that out, present that for you, and collapse time in those ways. And then if you're interested in my book that we didn't get to, but may have to be in the next one,
maybe we can definitely do a second part to this on another. You know what?
It's not about marketing, so it should be in another one.
So if anything, actually, like I said, we can literally do a separate episode on the regular segment of the ESL sessions and touch on a very specific topic, which, like I said, I literally just posted another one of the videos on audio production and what do you call it? Audiobooks and radio drama. That literally just did that. So we can definitely talk about that and how the process of publishing or creating a book is.
Yeah, I mean, I just quickly, I will say that I did not go to make a book. It was not a goal of mine. It was definitely a journey. It took me only 4 months, because there are resources now that help expedite things and make things way faster. And also, I do have time on my side. And it's called Letters for the Seemingly Functional, aka the people that seem super functional. I just think that we all have so much depth, and we all deserve to explore that depth and present that depth. But we can't present it if we don't understand it. And so that would just have to be a topic for another day, because this is all about marketing.
Oh, yeah. No, for sure.
But you can find it on Amazon.
There you go. It's on Amazon. So yeah, no, I'll definitely put that in the link in the description. So we'll go with that. But yeah, well, if anything though, for sure, before we close it off, first off, thank you, Marcolina. Thank you, Mars. and as we lovingly always referred to you while we were playing D&D, Barbados, we still
good to hear that again.
Yeah, I know, right? We still love you. Don't worry about it. We still remember the shenanigans. Like I said, that'll definitely be a part of the other episode. But no, thank you. Thank you for coming on to the ESL sessions and Mi Comunidad, being one of the the first people that really pushed me to do this and actually helped me out with it. That's one thing I didn't mention at the very beginning, was that with bits of your guidance and a lot of your inspiration with what you were doing at the time with video production and your content creation is what drove me to actually, say, it's time to come out of retirement, at least in this sense. So,
yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I truly believe in like breathing belief into other people, and I think that's the power of communication. And, I'm glad that you like let it sink in and you did the rest, because that's what people miss. They just miss that, like, letting it sink in.
Yeah, very true. Very awesome. True. And like I said, I really, really appreciate you. So we'll go ahead. We'll close it off. This has been another episode of the ESL sessions of En Mi Comunidad. And I hope you have a good rest of your afternoon, especially on this Friday. So, get that weekend started.
You too.
All right. We'll close it off.
All right.